Well, Varun, thank you very much for being part of our Global Asian Leader program and welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you or not. Fantastic to catch up. I know we are in two different parts of the world, but probably that's how the global world is now working together, right?
Exactly. So I'm based in Singapore at the moment. You're based in California. So we managed to find a time to speak together, which is great. So looking forward to the conversation. So for everyone, this is Varun Bhatia, who is not part of the Global Asian Leader program, so he's not a member of the program, but we were talking about it, and he was very excited by the idea. And he thought, if I can help, I'll be happy to. And so that's how this started. And today we're going to be talking a bit about his background, which is very interesting and very global, and find out a little bit what is learned, the lessons learned along the way of how to develop a global career as an Asian leader. So welcome, Varun.
Thank you very much.
So very briefly, just to introduce Varun at a high level, and I'll let him tell us much more about himself. But Varun is born in India. Had a very global HR career in many sort of blue chip, well-known, initially consumer goods organizations with Gillette, with Procter and Gamble, with Kraft Foods, and then eventually his career grew, global. And among other things, Varun has been the chief HR officer of Levi Strauss, the apparel company. He's been the chief HR officer of Air Asia, which is an airline based in Southeast Asia, and he's currently the chief people officer of Reali, which is a property tech scale-up company based in California.
Yeah, that's right.
So Varun, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to our members. Well, with such a global career, having been in India, in Singapore, in Malaysia, in US, tell us a little bit about how this career has evolved for you, how things happen, and sort of what have you learned along the way in terms of how an Asian leader like yourself can develop a global career and a global portfolio.
Yeah, no, Arnaud, thanks for the introduction. So as you mentioned, I was born in India. I'm actually a Singaporean right now, a Singaporean citizen and a permanent resident of the US. Now that itself, for many people, seems to be a handful in terms of, oh my God, so who are you really, right? I mean, and that's what kind of defines me, defines my life, and defines, me as a global Asian leader, right? Having lived and worked in many, many different countries. In fact, lived in 6 different countries, traveled to more than about 50 countries in the world, and still counting because really excited about travel and experiencing new cultures. And it really started when I was a kid. My dad was in the military in India, and we moved, if I recall, about 7 cities within India through my school, and I moved 8 different schools through my early education. So, getting used to new environments, new people, new culture.
Making new friends, I guess.
Making new friends, right. And leaving friends behind, but still staying in touch with them was all part of life. And change was always around the corner for me because of the childhood, I was growing up with. And as that happened, it just became second nature in terms of wanting to experience the world and move around the world, experience new cultures, and build new friends and networks and people who and experience different ways of doing work, right? Different ways of professionally developing your career. So that just became a part of one's life. But I must say, I think I was blessed, and I am blessed to have a very supportive family who have supported me through all this transition, because one can't do this alone. I mean, there's a lot of integrating into a society as you move from one country to the other, and getting a lot of the basic setup done, and making sure that you have a home when you come back from sometimes a tough day, sometimes a new beginning. There is a family which is a familiar family and a familiar environment that you're coming back to, because you do need that mix of familiarity and newness as you think about your life, right? And you want to experience life, because you just can't throw yourself always in the deep end doing things which are always new and changing, you do need some anchor, some stability through all this change. And that's where my family played a big part.
And did you find that you had to compromise sometimes in terms of some of your career choices to keep that side of your life, stable and happy? Sometimes, when we talk to candidates or to executives we work with, they say sometimes, oh, I wouldn't move here because my kids are in school and I cannot move them around right now. So have you had to make some of those choices?
That's a great question, Arnaud. I can think of many times actually that I had to make those choices. And sometimes they were great professional career choices that I had to say no to because the family or some other circumstances were really important. I mean, I can share very quickly a couple of very specific ones because I'm sure our global Asian leaders in this program will experience that. So one was when I was asked to go to a very remote factory in India when I was working with Gillette. And, I had a young baby at that point in time. And it meant that I would travel literally almost 2 hours one way to this factory from Delhi and 2 hours back. So I was almost 4 hours on the road. And at that point in time, we didn't have mobile phones. This was the very beginning of my career, right? So I was going to be out of touch with my young family for not only the 4 hours of journey, but even when I was there in the factory because, telephone lines and all didn't work. But I did make the call that I wanted to have that experience. And that was a choice I made. Taking on that professional experience for 4 years, I did that. And it was tough. So I had to find ways in my weekend to spend enough time with the family so that I could have a more balanced life, right? But that was a choice I made where it was call it a hardship assignment, and I chose to do that with my eyes open. And then there were other times when, I made a call when the company offered me a role, and multiple kind of times. One was an interesting one. I was based in Singapore with Gillette, and Gillette offered me to come to Boston. And this was just when 9/11 had happened here in the US. And literally around a month or so around that, just after that, was the offer. And my family was not comfortable. There were things happening here that we were not sure of, and I chose not to take on that assignment. But as luck would have it, after a year or so, I got another call for another assignment in Boston in a global role, which was even a larger role than what I had said no to a year back. So, somehow, destiny finds its way when you have the right intent, right? And I took that on and moved to Boston at that point in time. And then the multiple other, when Procter & Gamble acquired Gillette, they wanted me to go to Cincinnati to their global headquarters and move from Boston. And I was not ready to do that. They offered me a role in Europe to move to Geneva. And me and my wife went for a look-see trip there and decided for the sake of our son, who was in high school, we wanted him to continue in a certain education, which was not going to disrupt that. So we decided not to take that on. But then they were good enough to offer me a role back in Singapore, which made sense both for the family and for me. And I took that on.
Okay. Very, very, very wise sort of kind of decision making along the way to kind of sometimes you say yes, I'll do the hardship, but then I make sure that what are the must have for my family to go through that as much as possible, and sometimes saying no. So that's very interesting. Okay. I have another I'm very curious about something. You obviously worked in India, then Singapore, then you went to the US. You went very global. Then you came back to Asia. You came back to run sort of HR you came back to Singapore first, and then you went to Malaysia, which is again a new country for you, to run Air Asia as a chief HR officer. How did you make those decisions along the way to whether you should stay in the US or stay global in the West versus come back to Asia? And how do you think about those trade-offs, if there were any trade-offs?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because sometimes these are not decisions which you make, these are decisions made for you because of the circumstances around where you are in your career and what you think you need, right? And that's why being flexible and adaptable to one's career choices is really one of the most important lessons I've learned as I've thought of my career, looking back at my career. And I can honestly, I can call my career as a boomerang career in a way, because what's happened is, and it's probably different from many other people, because I worked in a country, then moved on to another one, and then come back to the same country. And I can give you very specific examples of how this happened. I started my career in India, and then from India moved to the UK. I was in London, and then I was asked to move back to to India because we had acquired a couple of companies. Gillette had grown dramatically there. Did a stint there, and then was asked to come back to the UK because there was another broader opportunity there, looking after Eastern Europe, Russia, and the Republic, and Mediterranean as the HR head for that, based out of London. A fantastic opportunity. And even though the family was settling back into India at that point of time, I think overall we felt this was great both for the kids and for me and my career, and moved back to the UK. Then from the UK, I had another opportunity in Singapore. I did that. And then from Singapore, came to Boston, as I mentioned earlier, in the US. Then after the Boston stint, went back to Singapore. So boomerang again, right? Going back to the same location. And then from Singapore, then came back to the US and joined Levi's in San Francisco. So did again another stint in the US. Then after that, as you mentioned, I moved to Malaysia and Thailand with AirAsia. And then I've come back again to the US, where I live now in the Bay Area. So it seems like a boomerang career where you go to a certain country, come back, and then go back to that country, and then use your enlarged kind of level of skills and experiences to go back to the country and do something different. I think that is the key. Even though I went back to India, to UK, to Singapore, and the US, it was very different opportunities. And one was building on whatever learnings one had in the previous stint.
So as long as you keep learning, as long as you keep developing and finding new challenges, and as long as the family is conscious of the trade-offs you have to make it work, then I guess it's okay.
Very true. I mean, that's the key. It's all about trade-offs. You said it beautifully. I mean, life is all about trade-offs. There's no perfect answer for anything we do, right? And you just have to figure out what's the trade-off, and does it make sense at that point of time? Because it's only at that point of time you make a decision. Looking forward and planning too far ahead is very, very difficult to do. Things change. So yeah, at that point of time, what's the best decision for you and your family?
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. So when you look back now, being an Asian leader who has played on the global stage in many different roles in Asia as well as in the US and in the UK, what role do you think Asian leaders can or should play on the global business stage? What kind of unique contributions an Asian leader like yourself might be able to make to a global business?
Yeah, no, again, great question, because, I think Asian leaders have a unique perspective, having, either grown up in Asia or having Asian values or Asian family surrounding them. And I can think of 4 or 5 key things and attributes I think Asian leaders would bring to the global stage. The first one is what I call foresight. I really, really believe, having worked in the US and Europe and Asia, Asians and Asian leaders have foresight and the ability to look around corners and connect the unconnected more than leaders who have worked in one geography, and particularly the developed world geography, where things change, but change slowly, and there are not so many changes which require you to look around corners and be able to anticipate change. And also, when there is no pattern, which is what we experience in many.
That's the world we live in today. Yeah.
Yeah, there are very few patterns But if you have the ability to connect the unconnected and create a pattern or land on a pattern of what is happening, I think you use that foresight, which I think is an innate ability Asian leaders have. So how do we focus on that particular attribute of foresight and build on that from a professional point of view is one particular unique contribution I think Asian leaders can play. The other one is the ability to build unique organization cultures, which I think are way beyond the contractual employer-employee relationship, which you find mostly in the developed world, right? It's a contractual employer-employee relationship. I believe Asian leaders on the global stage can build cultures which have a foundation of family values, because that's how they have been brought up, and the family means a lot. So how do you think about using your family values and the concept of mindfulness, which obviously comes a lot from Asia, and those are the two pillars I would call them of organization culture building, which Asian leaders can really use to build unique cultures in their organizations globally. And I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen with leaders of Google or Microsoft and Adobe, where there are leaders who come from Asia, but are building a culture which is a culture which is focused on
more connected, more people connections, I guess.
That's right. That's right. The third area is, I would say, driving innovation. I think that's really key because, as they say, scarcity is the mother of invention or innovation. And when you have constrained resources, you have to find ways around it to solve problems. As they say, when the tide is low, the rocks show, right? And when the rocks show, you do something about it. If the tide is high, the rocks don't show, and you don't feel the need to kind of change stuff. And that's why I think creativity, driving innovation is again something which just comes naturally to many Asian leaders. And you can drive more innovation at a global stage if you have that kind of mindset of using scarcity. And that helps not only in times of growth and boom times, but even in times when things are not doing well, global economies are not doing well.
Yeah.
Having that mindset of innovation, using scarcity as an advantage, I think is really important to driving innovation.
Interesting.
Yeah, the other area I feel Asian leaders really, again, can use is adaptability. Because as an Asian, you are experiencing the scale and pace of change nowhere else in the world, in the developed world, especially in the US and Western Europe. And therefore, Asian leaders innately are more agile and adaptable because change is everywhere around them. I mean, and everything is changing at a scale and a pace which is way beyond anywhere else in the world. So that the sense of adaptability is, I think, key for them to be adaptable personally, and also build teams which are agile and adaptable, and comes naturally, I think. And last but not the least, I would say for Asian leaders is, there's a unique contribution they can make, and that is to bridge what I believe is the growing economic divide between the haves and the have-nots across the world. Because Asian leaders come from countries where many people are living literally below the poverty line, and responsibility, I would say, to kind of help bridge that economic divide, which is causing not only economic issues, but social issues around the world. And that's where Asian leaders can play a big part.
Yeah, that's very true. Very interesting. So thank you. Thank you for sharing those insights. I was curious, as you were kind of going through those, one thing you didn't really mention, and maybe it's underlying everything, is sort of diversity. Is this idea that in this day and age, in Kingsley Gate, we do a lot of recruitments for companies, and when companies come to ask us for hiring, they want diversity in the candidates, or at least in the slates of candidates that they interview. So have you seen how Asian leaders sort of work in diverse environments? Are they more, to your point, adaptable, agiles? Have you seen examples of Asian diversity in action in corporate environments that you thought were interesting?
Yeah, I think diversity is a very interesting topic because for me, diversity is not about color or race or gender and those kind of classifications. Because honestly, as soon as we start doing that and classifying diversity and reporting diversity only on those lines, then I think we've taken away the essence of diversity. Because what we've done is we're generalizing and somewhat profiling a certain group of people, saying a certain race is like this, so therefore we need more people from this race or this gender or this color or whatever, because they'll bring a different perspective. Now that inherently we're making an assumption that everybody from that race brings a certain perspective, which is homogeneous for that
Yeah.
race, right? So inherently, as we start doing more and more of that, I believe this is going away from the true essence of what diversity is. Because I do believe, and I've seen this in action. I've seen two Asians can be much more different and diverse in their thinking than a Caucasian and Asian, depending
True.
on where the two Asians come from, what their backgrounds are, what their experiences are. So diversity is really, if I can define diversity in my mind, it's irrespective of race, religion, age, gender, orientation, etc. But it's all about having an equal opportunity to be heard and to be involved in the decision-making process of an organization. If we create that kind of a culture where people feel they have an equal opportunity to be heard and be involved in the decision-making process of the organization, then you're creating a truly diverse and inclusive organization. And I've seen this in action, and I've been fortunate, as you mentioned, worked with some really good companies who have been around for more than 100 years. Now, if a company has been around for more than 100 years, they've done something right? You don't exist for
they must have, yes.
Yeah, because you can't continue to exist and perform and thrive, right, for so many years. And I think at a core of what they've done is build diversity. Giving an example of Gillette or Procter & Gamble, at Gillette, I saw diversity in action. It was interesting that many of my Asian colleagues and even folks from South America and Africa and other places had careers around the world with increasing responsibility. And that was amazing.
Varun, maybe you can give us an example of diversity in action. I'm sure in your long career, you must have seen that in practice. So maybe share one or two examples with us.
Yeah, there's so many examples from different companies. But because I believe, I owe it to Gillette for my diverse career. That's where I started. I want to share an example of how diversity was brought to action at Gillette. In fact, Gillette, I think in the 1980s, about 40 plus years back, launched a program. It was an international trainee program where they would hire young graduates from local Asian universities, as well as US universities where Asians were studying. And after seeing them kind of perform for about 18 to 24 months in their home country, if they qualified from a level of performance and cultural kind of a connection with the company, they brought them into their global headquarters, either in Boston or regional headquarters in London, etc. And they brought them for about 18 months of a trainee assignment where they were given a specific role, but they were also also asked to kind of connect with multiple divisions and functions of the company and understand the culture of the company. And then they were sent back on an accelerated growth and career transition into a pretty significant role back to their home country, mostly back to the home country, so that they were comfortable in taking what they had learned and bringing it back to their home country, because at least culturally, from a country point of view, the culture was not different. But what I think, in a way, the company was trying to do was build a company culture which was going to be stronger than the country culture globally.
Yes, interesting.
Yeah, so that people became more global citizens of the company and could be rotated and being given assignments all around the world. And like I said, I feel thankful that I had the opportunity to be part of that kind of program where I had exposure in the London headquarters as a trainee, and then went back to India in a much larger role. So there was a certain program, and diversity really needs a specific programmatic approach. We're not only hiring to bring in the right people at the right time in the pipeline, the talent pipeline, because it can't be only hiring mid and senior people, but it's starting very early in people's careers and building that pipeline, and then supplementing it with mid to senior level hiring so that people see, at all levels in the organization having an opportunity for growth. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I like this idea that company culture sort of supersedes the country culture eventually, and how do you design an organization that allows you to do that? That's very interesting. One last question on that topic of taking maybe younger leaders and then sort of growing them to taking bigger roles. In our program, the Global Asian Leaders Program, we have people who are already in global roles. We have people who are they are away from their home markets, but they may not be already global yet, and they aspire to take on global responsibilities. What advice would you have for people who are not global yet in their roles and their scope, and aspire to do that? What would be your sort of 1 or 2, 3 top tips for them?
Sure. I think one of the things which is really important is building your internal network, right, of key international leaders within either your functional area, if you're in sales or marketing or HR or finance. Who are the key international leaders within your function? And how do you build a relationship with them and a network with them? And a couple of very simple ways of doing that is, proactively ask for mentorship with 1 or 2 of them, people who are influential and a key leader internationally. So that's one small. The other one would be, it's important that we do great work. I mean, everybody wants to do great work, but I think where I find in the US in particular, great work supplemented with the power of branding, internal branding, personal branding, is something very important for global organizations to provide opportunity to people. So if you're doing great work in Asia or some other place in the world, but you want to be a global leader, make sure you think of the work you do from the lens of branding your work, both internally and externally. Externally, that's one thing which I believe many Asian leaders don't necessarily do as much of a good job, is start getting more externally connected to networks where you have speaking assignments, where you write articles, where you are engaging with external talent in your area of expertise. And then as you do that internally, when you do great work, leverage on a big idea. Have one big idea and build around that and keep reinforcing that idea. So in that organization, people have that undeniable stamp of you on that idea. And as that happens, you will get recognition, and people will believe you have more global influence or more international influence, and therefore opportunity to get a role. The other one would be, as I mentioned earlier, throw yourself in the deep end, even if you don't know what the waters hold for you, right? There's sharks sometimes, there are lifeboats sometimes, but it doesn't matter. If you don't take the risk, I think it's going to be difficult, difficult to have global careers. And then two other small little tips. One is read the tea leaves of any conversation, of any decision-making process, but make the beverage that you believe is best suited for the organization. And I use the analogy of tea because, we all kind of link with tea when it comes to Asia, right? So read the tea leaves in every conversation, decision-making. But I think the beverage that you make should be what is best suited for the organization, right? Most appropriate. And last but not the least, and that's what I have stood for, be who you are. I mean, take the hard right decision rather than the soft wrong one. Many of us choose to take the soft wrong decision because we feel that's the way to kind of not rock the boat and continue to kind of climb the corporate ladder. But I've seen, honestly, if you're true to yourself and you stand for who you are, and sometimes take that, hard right decision rather than the soft wrong one,
yeah,
you will be more respected, and people will believe in you, and give you greater opportunities. So those are some of the things
Interesting.
which I've experienced and I believe might help people.
Okay, fantastic. Well, all great tips. The one I'm gonna pick up on is this branding suggestion, because I think you're right. I think generally Asian leaders, in particular, compared to American leaders in general, are not so kind of confident in terms of doing their own branding and sort of building their own networks and sort of putting themselves out there. And hopefully, this program, the Global Asian Leaders Program, is one way that some of those leaders can do that and can sort of build those connections. Number one, and number two, that sort of that profile more externally. So we're happy to help there if we can. So great. Well, Varun, thank you very much. We want to keep this time relatively short, so I'm sure that we could spend another half an hour talking about a lot of different things, because your career has been amazing. But once again, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure all of the Global Asian leaders in the program will appreciate that as well.
Thank you, Arnaud, and best of luck to all the Global Asian leaders, and wish you the very best. Have a more fulfilled and complete life beyond just having a global career, right? So.
That's the key takeaway. That's very important. All right.
Thank you.
A lot. Thanks.
See you. Bye.
Bye.